Welcome to the Growth, Grace, and Prosperity Podcast. Join Stewart Heath for down-to-earth conversations with top professionals, entrepreneurs, and leaders who have a story to tell. Let's get rolling.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our second episode of the Growth, Grace, and Prosperity Podcast. We're very excited that you're here, and I think you're in for a treat with our guest, Russell Greer, a very successful entrepreneur that I've gotten to know over the last several years, and I consider him a friend. I can't wait to share his story with you. Russell, thanks for being here.
Glad to be here.
Hey, Russell, when you think back on your career, and if you want to include a little summary of your career and what you've done to date, but share with us some a key game-changing moment for you that helped you pivot your career and get to your success.
Well, for years, I was involved in different kinds of businesses, different industries. I think doing that helped me develop an appreciation for how important people are, the knowledge and the terminology. With each different industry, you have to learn, but learning how to build relationships and how to deal and lead people, that was the thing that you could carry from place to place and have it be instantly useful wherever you are. A game changer for me was, I know a lot of people say this, was reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Much of my work experience had been working in and around different family businesses. So as a family member, a lot of times you get an opportunity to be introduced to a business that's not as easy as it is for others. And but I'd always wanted to own my own business, and it wasn't until I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad that it really changed my idea about how that should work. So I read the book. I decided I'm going to get into my own business. I ended up going into a partnership with a friend of mine to buy a commercial construction firm. We bought another company. We did that for about 5 years, and he was a great partner. But in the end, I decided I really wanted to do something on my own. I really, partners can be good or bad, but even with a good partner, it's unusual for both partners to want to go at the same pace. This partner was a little older than I, and I needed to be a little more aggressive in my approach to business because I had not accumulated the assets that he had. So I told him I was going to look for something else, spent about a year looking, and decided I wanted to purchase a pre-existing business. My skill set, and I think this is part of what helps you in life, is figuring out what you're good at and what you're not good at. And starting business from scratch was really not my core strength. I really felt like I was a lot better taking a business from, one level of operation to another level of operation. So I look for an existing business. That proved to be a long journey, well, at least long in the sense that it's the pace I wanted to move. Took me about a year and a half. Looked at a number of different businesses, made offers on businesses. I had deals on businesses, had deals fall through because of the due diligence or financing or other kinds of things. But in the end, I found somebody by running an ad in the classified section of the newspaper. And an old friend of mine called and ended up selling me his old business. But that whole thing got rolling because of reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and decided that there was a proactive step I could take in being responsible for my own financial success. And that didn't involve working for somebody else.
Right. Well, it is somewhat become cliche, as they say, but that book has impacted a lot of people. That was a game changer for me as well. I remember talking to a mentor many years ago when I just had my CPA practice and kind of whining about how I wasn't building any wealth. I was making good money, wasn't really building anything. And he said, "Stewart, you're not even in the game." And he recommended the book for me, and it was transformative, the way of thinking, and how to look at business and how to look at whether something is an asset or a liability. So tell us, if you would, about bumps in the road you've had, maybe more than one bump, and how you handled them and what you learned from them.
That's a great question. Um, in fact, I was just telling somebody the story today about the time in that business I acquired. I ended up owning that business for 20 years before I finally sold it. But I had about 2008, this business sold products to the building industry, the residential building industry. About 2008, we had started to have a lot of problems. It turned out I lost my lease and had to move right in the middle of that. I'd already seen a couple of competitors go under. And anyway, so I ended up moving, and it came time for when it first came time for my lease to renew, I was running out of cash. And I thought, I can't keep this up. And it turned out the problem was pretty simple. It was that my sales team was not collecting deposits on their orders like they were supposed to. And so I was buying product, sitting on it for a long period of time, and I didn't have the cash to manage that. And I was trying to figure out how to get out of that mess. And so what I did was we had regular team meetings off site. So I went in and told the team that the time had passed for me to renew my lease. And I just left it there. And they looked at me and said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, 6 months before my lease expires, I have to give them notice of my intention to renew. I didn't give them that notice. So in August, we won't have a lease anymore. And just stopped. And they all looked at me and they said, well, what are we going to do? Oh, you mean we're not going to have a business at the end of August? I said, as of right now, it looks like we might not. Well, what do we have to do? How are we going to change things? Now we're talking. I've been telling them for months, you need to start collecting deposits. So this time I said, now you understand how it plays out. I'm not pulling money out of my back pocket anymore to finance your purchase of product for which we don't really have customers, and for which those customers that are for real, we don't have deposits to sit on their product while they finish their projects. So if you start collecting deposits, I'll consider renewing the lease. And they turned around the behavior and right then.
I absolutely love that. Yeah, I've told many people you're one of the smartest guys I've ever met, and that's just another example. How that's great, it's brilliant, and it turned things around, obviously, because I'm familiar with the business, and that's great. It's surprising to many people. I was just talking to some college students not too long ago that, guys, this is not the end of your education. This is really just the beginning. And anybody who's successful is a lifelong learner. So, and I know that's true for you too. How do you handle learning new things and approaching new information? As perhaps you're approaching a new line of business or anything. How do you handle learning new things?
Well, I mentioned earlier that I've been in a number of different industries. And every time I'd get into a new industry, I'd start working with some new team members, and they would look at me and they go, well, you don't know anything about this business. How are you going to manage? I said, you're right. I don't know everything about this business, but what I will learn, I'll learn from you, just like I'm going to bring some things from other places that you haven't heard either. But typically, I would always sign up for whatever association had anything to do with my industry, try to go to all their conventions or associations, any kind of training they had. I'd just immerse myself in it. Books are also a big help, especially if they're industry specific. But nowadays, the way I learn is I use podcasts, because I can pick, when you want to stop and read, usually, you need it to be quiet, might be late in the day, that might not be the best time of day to learn something that's not in story form. But podcasts, everywhere I go, I turn on a podcast, and I just pick, half a dozen different kinds of things that different topics, different perspectives. and I just listen and learn. And that is one of the most powerful ways I've added to my learning on an ongoing basis.
You got any favorite podcasts you want to share?
Um, Not at the moment right now, but I've kind of rotated out of some. Victor Davis Hanson is one I like to listen to. I still find him relevant. I used to love to listen to Rush Limbaugh when he was on the radio, but when he passed away, then of course so did his radio show, and that's when I switched over to the podcast. But
Yeah.
there's a number of good real estate podcasts that I used to listen to, but none in particular that I'm in love with right now.
Yeah. If you don't mind, as a successful person and people usually end up with investable capital. How do you approach managing the assets that no numbers or anything like that? What's your approach? Do you have a mix of stocks, bonds, alternatives, or where do you think the opportunities are for people to put their money in?
Well, I'm still early enough into this phase of my life, as in, and what I mean by that is after the sale of my business. The business preoccupied 110% of my attention. And now that that's over with, my education has begun, and I'm working on a couple of different ways to build wealth and to earn my income, spendable income, passively. Probably half of my investments are in the stock market, but they include CDs, a few bonds, some alternative investments, and but I have a seasoned broker that's helping me with that. That's not something that I study and try to second guess what he does. I more or less learn from him, but I have that set aside for him to mess with. The rest of the capital I'm full with. And in that, I'm dividing it between real estate, and I'm actually searching for another business to purchase. So that's kind of how I'm going to have to divide it up. Only this time, when I get into business, there won't be that immediate need to generate a salary like there has always been before. Now I can live passively. I can take whatever cash the business spends off and use it to reinvest in and grow the business. Real estate, I think, is worth a little more mention because I know that's something you're active in, and I've got some real estate that I own directly. It's commercial in nature. I decided at this point in my life, I'm old enough that I really didn't want to start accumulating, one home at a time. Besides all the craziness that's going on in the residential home market, so I ended up going the commercial route, and then I'm doing some syndicated deals. And if I were to vote today, I'd probably not do the independent buildings and just stick with the syndicated deals. But I imagine for most people, it has a lot to do with knowing the right people to get started there. Otherwise, you pretty much have to do it on your own.
Yeah. Trust has to be earned, and sometimes it comes hard. So thank you, Russell. I got one last question for you. If you had one nugget of advice for anybody who's starting out in business, and one thing for them to follow, what would that be?
Don't be afraid to surround yourself by people that are better than you are. I'm good at some things. I'm not good at a lot of things. And to the extent that I have hired and associated myself with people that know more than I do, my learning curve is much faster, and I think success is much more open-ended. So that's what I would suggest.
Thank you, Russell. Really appreciate you taking the time and sharing your life and business experiences with us, and thank the audience for paying attention and tuning in and watching. And we really appreciate you, and watch out for another episode of the Growth, Grace, and Prosperity podcast. Y'all take care.
Thanks for tuning in to the Growth, Grace, and Prosperity podcast. If you'd like to be a guest, visit growthgraceprosperity.com/guest. We'd love to hear your story.